Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah, I'm hoping that my voice is being heard, and I will assume that unless I'm told otherwise. So inshallah, welcome again to the second episode of the stories from the Holy Quran. And inshallah, like we did the last time, we'll talk about some other interesting stories within the Quran al-Kareem. This is the month of the Quran, alhamdulillah, and this is where we're going to reflect, ponder, recite, and learn from the Quran. So inshallah, we will continue with our series of, let's just say, the lesser known or the lesser talked about stories from the Quran. So inshallah, today, we're going to talk about a very, very interesting story, right? This story is in Surah Al-Qalam, right? And it's about a story of the owners of a certain garden. And Allah SWT says in the Quran, Bismillah, A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Noon wal qalami wa ma yasturun, ma anta bi ni'mati rabbika bi majnoon, wa inna laka la ajran ghayra mamnoon. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. So this is a surah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the surah by taking the oath of the pen and what is inscribed, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, as we go in the middle of the surah, that is when the story of the people of the garden is talked about. So let's just talk about the story in brief, and then we can extrapolate some of the lessons from within the story. The story goes something like this: is there's a very righteous man, and the scholars talk about where this incident may have taken place. Some say that it was in Yemen, some say that it was in Abyssinia, and it was amongst some people from amongst the people of the book. But regardless, we don't have absolute details exactly where this incident took place. But there's a righteous man, and he has a huge garden. He's got a very, very large garden, and the garden gives out a lot of fruits. And he used to do very well from the produce of this garden, from the yield of this garden. And he was also a very righteous man, a very pious man. So he wouldn't basically keep all the produce to himself, all his harvest to himself, but rather he would share it with the fuqara, with the du'afa, with the needy people from within his community. And he had a very interesting way of doing it. Now, there's some discussion about how he would give the sadaqah. One of the ideas is that he would harvest the garden, and if you go and you harvest a garden, you would see that as the fruits are being picked up, or as the vegetables, or as the produce is being harvested, some of it falls on the ground, right? Invariably, whatever machine you're using, or whatever hand device you're using, some of it falls on the ground. So what he would do is he would let that be on the ground, and he wouldn't pick it up. So say there's like 10% or 5% of the produce falls off the ground, right? So he would just let that be on the ground, and he would let the poor people come and pick all of that up. That way, they don't necessarily have to beg or ask him, and they would just, take away the leftovers. And then the other opinion is he would just formally give sadaqah. But regardless, the people would know him, and they would know that this man is generous, and they would gather by his garden, and they would wait. They would wait for him to. Harvest, and then they would then collect whatever the leftovers, if you will. Now, this man, eventually, he passed away, and he had a couple of sons. Now, these sons were, smart sons, as some of the children would consider their parents uncool. And they thought to themselves, our dad, he gives us all this money and stuff. 5 or 10%, or I'm just making this up, right? They're just probably talking to themselves. They're saying, all of this produce that is left on the ground, that is a good chunk of change, right? Say, let's just assume it's 10%. That 10% of our money, of the profit that we'd make is just on the ground, and he just lets these poor people take it away. So, we shouldn't do that, and they basically make their excuses. Our family is growing. We can't really It's right to give sadaqah to the poor, but this is not the time, etc., etc. So they're making their own excuses of why they don't want to give sadaqah. So, anyways, they decide that after the father passed away, that we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to continue the sadaqah business anymore. We're going to collect everything ourselves and we're going to sell it and make a larger profit. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, describes their discussion and describes their condition in the Quran. It's very beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Is aqsamu liyasrimunnaha musbihina wala yastafnun." They say that they take an oath. They say, we will take the foods in the morning and we will not make any exception. And one of the interpretation of that is we're not going to share this with anybody. No exceptions for the poor. We're just going to get all of this ourselves, right? So they make that oath, and then they proceed. They proceed to their garden. Now, their garden is not necessarily close to where they live. They have to make a little hike to go to the garden, and then they start working on the garden. And then what do? They decide that they're going to go in the morning at a time where the poor people usually are not there, right? So there's a certain time where most people go to their gardens and most people go to their fields to do the harvesting. So they go to it at an odd time so that they can really bypass the poor people and just collect everything themselves, right? So they're sleeping the night and they're deciding we're going to wake up early in the morning and we're going to go and basically do our harvest and get everything ourselves. And also describes them, وَهُمْ نَائِمُونَ. They're sleeping. And while they're sleeping, something unusual happens, right? Something unusual happens. There is some sort of a calamity that strikes that garden, right? Whether it's a wind, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a tornado, we don't know the details. But eventually, what does happen is the entire crop is destroyed. The entire crop, whatever they're going to go and harvest, is destroyed. And they're going in the morning, right? In the morning, they wake each of themselves up, and they're going whispering, say, don't talk loud. وَهُمْ يَتَخَافَتُونَ, right? And they're rushing quickly. وَغَدَوْا عَلَى حَرْدٍ قَادِرِينَ. They're going really quickly, and they're just sneaking in to their gardens so that they can quickly harvest and take everything before the poor people get a wind of it, get an idea. But then when they reach there, initially when they reach the garden, they're shocked and they think it's not their garden because the day before everything was perfect. But now this thing is like completely destroyed, and they say, فَلَمَّا رَوَّهَا قَالُوا إِنَّا لَضَالُّونَ. Right? They saw that and they say, maybe we lost our way. Maybe this is not our garden. This is some other place. But then they realize, no, this is it. This is our garden, and it's destroyed. Something happened in the night, and all our produce is gone. And they say, بَلْ نَحْنُ مَحْرُومُونَ. We're deprived of the fruits. They're deprived of the fruits. We are deprived of the fruits. So it strikes them. And then immediately they realize, what is it that we have done differently than what our dad used to do, that something like this happened? They realize that, subhanAllah, we didn't praise Allah. Number one, we didn't praise Allah. And number two, we decided not to share the bounty that Allah is going to give us with the rest of the people. So one of them, he's a little bit like his father, right? One of the brothers, he is on the disposition of his father, and he says to the rest of his brothers, قَالَ أَوْسَطُهُمْ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. Didn't I tell you guys? Didn't I tell you all? Why do we not pronounce the tasbih? Yani, why don't we praise Allah? And in other words, why don't we attribute this blessing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and why don't we share it with the rest of the people? And then all of them, they come to the conclusion, قَالُوا سُبْحَانَ رَبِّنَا إِنَّا كُنَّا ظَالِمِينَ. They basically say, all of them together say, look, we all were wrongdoers. And they say, oh Allah, you are pure. We pronounce the purity of our Lord, and we are the wrongdoers. So they recognize the mistake that they make. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says that later on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does replace this garden for them when they repent. But what are the important stories that we can derive from this amazing story in the Quran, right? So the first lesson is a realization that we have to have within ourselves that the wealth that we have is not ours. And it's a very difficult realization, right? It's not easy to think that, because I go to work, I work hard, from 8 a.m. in the morning to 6 p.m. in the night, and I drive there, and I work, with my hands, with my limbs, with my intellect, and then I worked to get this job, right? I went to school for 18 years, and then I went to college for another 4 years, and I did my graduate school for another 4 years, and I did, my residency, or I did my super specialization, I did my courses, etc., etc., etc. So I did all of this, and I finally got this job, or I made this business. I worked day and night, and I basically went on to sacrifice my night's sleep, and I built this business by sacrificing my time. And now I have this wealth. And when I have this wealth sitting in front of me, I have to say, this is my wealth. This is something that Allah has given to me. And it's a difficult realization because you work hard for it. Now, if you think about it though, why is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wealth? Why isn't it my wealth? Because who is it who created the opportunity for me to get all of that, right? How was I able to study? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me a sound mind that I went to school and college and I was able to study. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the money to be able to afford to go to college. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me hands and feet to be able to be in a position to drive to go to college. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then gave me the ability to work appropriately and properly to be able to get that paycheck. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me that job. So that realization is very important, that the possessions that I have are not really mine. There's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to me out of His own grace, right? The people of the garden, that's the mistake they made. Their mistake was they thought that this is their own earning. This is their own doing. Rather, this was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving them. That fact was something that their dad recognized, that their father recognized. And what did he do? In order to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in addition to that, he shared whatever he had with the destitute and the poor. Now, I'm going to end with this in a few minutes. But this is the month of Ramadan. And Alhamdulillah, subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us enter another month of Ramadan. And we know that this is the month of fasting, the month of the Qur'an, the month of patience, the month of giving. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was the most generous of people. Like this is a hadith, both in Bukhari and Muslim. He was the most generous of people. And in Ramadan, he would be even more generous to a point that it is said that the Prophet ﷺ would be more generous than a fast-moving, nourishing wind, right? Min rihin mursala. That is how he was generous. Yani he would be giving more that he would normally give. So this is the month where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is providing us with rizq. And what it behooves us, it's our responsibility that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, that we share this with people. Now, we know that we're living in a difficult time. A lot of people are hurting. People are suffering. People have lost their jobs because of this pandemic. And, people otherwise who would have been in a fairly decent situation may not be so because of job loss, or, maybe they've gotten sick from the virus, etc., etc. So for those of us who are able to do so, it's our responsibility that we seek out these people and we help these people, whether they're locally within the community, whether they're nationally, or whether they're international, right? The entire world, this calamity that we're going through right now is not a local calamity, it's a global calamity. So people are hurting throughout the world. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, from His grace, given us something, it's our responsibility that we help our brothers, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is again a hadith in Muslim, Allah helps a servant, Allah helps a slave as long as he helps his brother, right? Allahu fi awni al-abdi ma kana abdu fi awni al-akhi. So as long as we are going to seek out and help our brother, the reality is we're really helping ourselves. If we give to someone, the first person to benefit from that, in this world as well, in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give barakah in our own wealth. As long as we're able to look at these, find the people who are in need and help them, the reality is we're helping ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give barakah, and He is going to replace whatever we're given, right? And we have to also understand that a lot of the wealth that we have, a lot of the provisions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, these are given to us because of our support to the weak, right? And this is something that I'm not saying that, it's not something I'm making up. Rather, this is a hadith to the Prophet, right? This is mentioned in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu reports that the Prophet said, seek out the vulnerable amongst you. Seek out the vulnerable amongst you, right? So you have to go and literally search for the people who are weak amongst us. Verily, you are only given provision and support due to your support of the weak. So the paycheck that I'm getting is not necessarily my doing. Rather, there is someone who is in need, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving that amount to me so that through me, He is able to give to His servant. Because what is the benefit for me? That is actually a dual benefit for me. Allah is giving this to me, and now I'm also getting the reward of helping my brother. And finally, one of the other things that we should do, right, is, as it said, seek out the people. Seek out the vulnerable people amongst you. Now, because of the current situation that we're in, a lot of people may be suffering, and ordinarily they're not used to a job loss, right? They're not used to a income loss like that. But because of these, unforeseen circumstances of this pandemic, they may have lost their livelihood. But they're not the kind of people that are used to asking other people, right? Because you have people that are fairly well-to-do, but all of a sudden something happens, and they're not necessarily in the habit of asking people. So all of a sudden they're in this new situation where they need help, but they don't want to ask help from anybody. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about these people in the Qur'an, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that يَحْسَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُ أَغْنِيَاءَ مِنْ تُعَفُّفِ, right? The charity is for the poor who have been restricted in the cause of Allah, unable to move in the land. And an ignorant person, yani a person who wants to give sadaqah, would look at them and he would think that these people are self-sufficient because of their restraint. They're not going asking, saying, hey, I lost my job, or I'm in a situation where I need some money, can you help me out? Just because of their restraint and their tawakkul on Allah. But you will know them by their signs, by the signs of their faces. تَعْرِفُهُمْ بِسِيمَاهُمْ لَا يَسْأَلُونَ النَّاسَ إِلْحَافًا. They don't ask people, persistently, or just go about asking for people, but you will recognize them by their signs. Now, typically, if you want to search for these people, you should look for these people in the corners of masjid, in the corners of the masajid. They're people you will not recognize them because they're not going to be in tattered clothes. You're not going to ask people, but they're making dua, and they're usually in the corners and they're crying. And people of insight are able to see them. I've seen people that would go to the people in the corners and ask them, do you need something? And then truly, sometimes you find people who actually need something, and they're not asking anybody but Allah. And perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the door for them through somebody in the masjid. So these are people that we ought to look into or look for and try to see if He can help. So with this, inshallah, we're going to end. The summary of today's talk is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who provides us, and whatever we have is from the blessing of Allah. It's from whatever Allah has given us. And it is our responsibility, it is our duty that from whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, that we share from those who are less fortunate. And rather, it's a dual test for us, right? The one who's being tested, the one who doesn't have enough food or enough money, he has one test. But the one who has enough, he actually has two tests. His first test is a test that he has to give shukr, and he has to recognize and realize that this is not from himself. And his second test is he has to share this with the others. So he is now facing a dual test. So because in this season we're not necessarily being directly contacted by the people who collect charity from within the masajid, because normally, in a Jummah you would have fundraisers, in the masjids after Taraweeh you have fundraisers. People are not, because the masjids are not open, the masajid are not open, that avenue is closed. That avenue is closed for people who would normally go and ask for charity. So it's our responsibility that the charity that we would normally give, in our prior Ramadans, we should seek out the people, number one, who need it and who don't ask, and also look into the organizations that normally we would donate to, and they're not able to get to us as they would have access to us in a random or in a Jummah of Ramadan or in a Taraweeh of Ramadan. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide us immense barakah in whatever He has given us. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a tawfiq to thank Him, and may He subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a tawfiq to spend in His cause without riyah, without any inkling of pride and any inkling of thinking that we're doing a favor to someone when we give them any money or when we give them any, when we help them. So may He subhanahu wa ta'ala give us barakah in our wealth. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasts, our charity, our qiyam, our siyam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah bil amin. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, please continue to try and tune in for the programs that are lined up. And also, inshallah, there was a email that went out for the fundraiser for Masjid Al-Huda. Please donate generously in that online fundraiser as well. Inshallah, with that we will end. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah bil amin. Jazakumullah khair.